Race discrimination in employment, education, and housing obviously kept crime a serious problem. And I don't want to downplay the crime of the 90s, which was lower than the 80s, but higher than now. Between 1990 and 2000, the homicide rate dropped by 44%. Also, violent crime rates per capita fell from 729.6 per 100,000 people to 506 per 100,000 people. This was progress, but still high when compared to current modern violent crime rates. In 1991, after 2 students were murdered in a drive-by at Dunbar High School in Baltimore, Maryland, a student asked visiting Vice President Al Gore, "What are you going to do? And when are you going to do it?" In Detroit in 1994, the 81-year-old civil rights icon Rosa Parks was attacked and robbed by a 29-year-old black man named Joseph Skipper, who had robbed other elderly black women. To make matters worse, police took between 40 to 50 minutes to reach her home after a neighbor called the police. Skipper was eventually hunted down and beaten before being shipped off to prison, prompting Parks to remark, "Many gains have been made, but as you can see, at this time, we still have a long way to go, and so many of our children are going astray." The owner of Little Caesars Pizza, Mike Ilitch, quietly paid to move her to a safer part of Detroit. If senseless violence could touch a black civil rights icon, it could touch anybody.
You gave me this job, and we're making progress on the things you hired me to do. But unless we deal with the ravages of crime and drug and violence, and unless we recognize that it's due to the breakdown of the family, the community, and the disappearance of jobs, and unless we say some of this cannot be done by government because we have to reach deep inside to the values, the spirit, the soul, and the truth of human nature, none of the other things we seek to do will ever take us where we need to go.
That speech that Clinton gave in 1993 was well received. It's funny that most of Clinton's paternalistic rhetoric was being said by Farrakhan and other black conservatives, as well as black Democrats. Of course, motherhood and marriage gets a deep dive in episode 5, as well as Clinton's numerous sexual scandals, but it's key to understand the general beliefs of most voting black Americans at this time made that speech well received. The next year, in 1994, in front of 12,000 members of the National Baptist Convention USA, who you remember sent the letter in support of Mike Tyson, Clinton said, "You shouldn't have a baby before you're ready, and you shouldn't have a baby when you're not married. You just have to stop it. I'll try to do my part, but this is not a government deal. This is the way people are behaving, as if there were no respect for themselves and no future. We have to stop." This speech, delivered in the wake of the crime bill, made Jesse Jackson remark, "One would expect him to come here and speak of economic stimulus and jobs and economic development. Instead, we are getting moral lessons on how to live. And they are good moral lessons. But we must fight welfare and crime with jobs and economic development." The crime bill that Clinton signed was stuffed with incentives for various groups. An assault weapons ban, funds for midnight basketball to give inner-city teens a sense of community and late-night activities, the Violence Against Women Act and guidelines to track sex offenders, all that pleased liberals. For law and order conservatives and those who claim to care purely about economics, there was the removal of Pell Grants for inmates, $9 million earmarked for prison construction, $8 billion to hire 100,000 cops, the 3 strikes provision, and new sentencing provisions that expanded the federal death penalty, mandatory minimum sentencing, and incentives for states to be harsher with sentencing and to limit parole. At the signing, Clinton was joined by black women, like when he would sign the welfare bill. It had the support of various black leaders, like the first black mayor of Baltimore, Kurt Schmoke, who you may recall also called for the decriminalization of weed back in the 80s. In his city, violent crime had grown during the period of 1987 to 1993, while nationwide averages had dropped. 39 clergy members signed a letter supporting the crime bill, and 10 black mayors of Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit, Denver, and others sent a letter of support to the Congressional Black Caucus. Only 10 black members in the House of Representatives out of 38 voted against the crime bill in protest of the death penalty additions. And according to a 1994 poll, 58% of non-white voters supported the crime bill, compared to 49% of white voters. Of course, course, others saw the canary in the coal mine. Black leaders like John Conyers promoted alternative crime bills that didn't rely on prison expansion. Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition lobbied against the crime bill, and Time magazine even pointed out that more prisons wasn't a solid solution. While police had long been able to be corrupt without much interference, the 1994 crime bill would incentivize corruption like never before. At the same time, Clinton's critics like Bob Dole in a 1996 interview with Ebony magazine insisted that Clinton had transformed the war on drugs into a full retreat, chiding Clinton for proposing eliminating hundreds of drug enforcement positions and promising Ebony's readers that if he were elected, he'd bring the hammer of the law down on criminals and dealers. A continued concern in the over-policing of black citizens was the racial profiling of motorists that came to be known as driving while black.